didn't see you there. Welcome to this week's episode of Greaser Garage Dirty Daily Driver. Today we're going to be continuing on with the teardown of our 350 small block Chevy. Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to take off these valve springs and keepers so we can remove the valves from the heads and have a better look at them and see what kind of damage, if any, was done to it, and decide on whether or not we're going to keep those valves and redress them, or if we're just going to replace them whole send. Hold up! You all know the drill. We're dealing with a job here that's super greasy and has tons of clothes staining compounds, so we're going to ditch any clothing that we don't want permanently stained, and we'll come back to the work. Okay, just before we get full into it, we'll get ourselves a spare jar from inside the house there, and we're going to take all of these bolts out of here, head bolts, and we'll just put them aside. You can't reuse head bolts once they've been released, because they can potentially stretch and you don't want to have that risk going on later on. And we're going to replace these with studs anyways, and I'll talk more about that towards the end of the episode. But just so they're not falling on our feet and getting in our way while we're doing our work, I'll just move them and throw them aside. It's always good to keep some spare bolts in and around the garage. You never know what you're going to need them for. Okay, so last week when we were going to try this job, this is the valve spring removal tool that I had. It wasn't really up to the task on this particular engine, so through the miracle of shopping, I went out and bought one that should adequately do it. Let me get it set up and I'll show you how it works. Okay, to properly use this tool, what you do is you adjust the jaws on the bottom here, which are adjustable with this thumb screw, and get it seated on the top of the spring. I'll get you come around back here and I'll show you the back side now. So, you've got this threaded rod with kind of a base plate on it, and you thread that right into, so it makes contact or firm contact with the valve itself, because that's going to hold the valve in place while we compress that spring. So, the reason why we're compressing the springs is each of these springs is held in part by a two-part keeper that sits right at the top of the valve itself. Once we compress this, we'll hold our hand here as we're compressing it, just so we can catch those components. We'll put them aside, and I'll show you how the whole thing works. See right there are those keepers I was talking about. These little guys right here. Now, I'll put them aside, and as I release the tension, it'll actually allow the spring to clear the valve entirely. Back off the tension on the back here. And the whole assembly will come out. Just like that. Okay, so here is an exhaust valve disassembled. We've got the valve itself, which operates within the channel there, allowing the exhaust gases to escape on the exhaust stroke. This is all governed by the rockers, which are affected by the cam. We have here at the top, as you can see, some grooves, which correspond with these keepers, two-part keepers here, which have grooves as such. You can actually get them to seat right there, and they kind of lock in place and are held in place by spring tension and prevent the spring from flying off as well. Additionally, you got the spring itself. We've got this hat, which is on this one is damaged, and the top component here, which actually is the brace plate. It's got kind of a taper in it, just as the keepers are also tapered to hold everything firmly and snugly in place. This particular valve, if you have a look, it's a little hard to tell, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on camera at all, but it is actually slightly bent. So I'm going to disassemble the rest of them and have a look, but I figure what we're going to do is replace them, and we'll talk a bit more about that towards the end of the video as well. But for right now, let's get the rest of these valves out of that engine head. Okay, so looking at these, what we've been removing, there is some warpage and damage, so we're just going to replace the whole line in this engine block. What I figure here is we're going to just remove these so we can circle back to them at the end of the video. Let me show you an old school trick on how to remove these, told to me by a friend of mine. First thing you do is you grab the most useless socket you own, which happens to be metric because everything we're doing is imperial. And you grab a hammer, place the socket over top of the valve and the spring, give her a few solid whacks, and it should dislodge the keepers and allow the spring to come out. Have a look. Warning, only do this with the system you're not planning to reuse. Let's see, that's one keeper out. There we go. As you can see, got the keeper, the other keeper, the assembly, spring, and it frees that valve up, and we can grab it from the bottom later on. Okay, so real talk for a moment here. Wailing on them with a sledge and a socket is not exactly the recommended way to remove valve springs, but it's definitely a lot faster and funner than fighting with a big C-clamp kind of monstrosity. So that made short work of the job here, and I want to stand these up and let you guys have a closer look. Okay, so from this side here, everything looks pretty good. There doesn't really appear to be any damage to any of these passageways, where the valves ride through here. And I'll spin around and have a look on the back. You can see on the back, we got a slightly different story. Our exhaust ports are okay. Really nothing too wild there. Look pretty clean. Our intake ports are pretty gummy though, and that's a combination of a couple things. It has to do with all of the bad oil seals and leaking that was going on in this car, or truck rather I should say. Also, it has to do with the fact that this system ran an EGR up until the moment it exploded. And an EGR is an exhaust gas recirculating system, which was really popular and brought into effect in the late 70s, early 80s, as part of the California emission control standards and trying to save the planet and all that fancy jazz. So, the only thing it really did is work on deteriorating and gumming up the internal workings of internal combustion engines and making a big nuisance for people trying to refurbish them. What we're going to do is clean up this head, both of them actually. They're both in the same condition. Give it a good go over. We're going to buy a new set of valves, exhaust and intake. We're going to lap them to each other, but none of that's going to go on in today's video. Okay, we're going to take a minute here and talk about what we're going to salvage from this engine and what we're going to throw away. First thing we're going to salvage, of course, is the block. that's the bread and butter of the system, and it's a 4-bolt main system, so we definitely want to reuse it. It's beautiful, happy. We'll take it to a machine shop and get it rebored and all that after we clean it up and remove the freeze plugs. But yeah, it's fully salvageable and doesn't appear to have anything really catastrophically wrong with it. We're of course going to save these heads, and same thing, we're going to clean them up, get a new set of valves and springs, get everything all happy hunky-dory like it was brand new before we put it all back together. A couple things we're definitely not going to keep is we are not going to keep any of the old valves, springs, or that hardware. That's going to be entirely replaced. Also, we're going to ditch all of our old push rods here. I think we're going to ditch all of our rockers, and we're going to ditch all of our oil lifters. Okay, another thing we're not going to save from this engine is the connecting rods and pistons. We're going to put these all aside because you never know. I might decide to go into an ashtray making business or coffee table making business, or you know, I don't quite have enough clutter in my garage, so I figured some of the car parts that are sitting on the back shelf here might as well have some friends and company. Unfortunately, another thing we can't save are these bearings. They are in beautiful condition, well, except for those ones. And yeah, it's a real shame that we can't reuse them, but the new bearings are going to have to be mated to the new crankshaft, so we definitely don't want to start mixing that up. Okay, we are going to keep the oil pan, of course, and some of these bits and brackets that come off for holding the wires later on. We're going to keep our oil pump because it is serviceable, just needs a cleaning. Keep our fuel pump, same deal, just needs a cleaning. And we're going to keep this rod. I didn't really talk about it in the first video, but this is a rod that's used, it's hit by the camshaft, and it activates the mechanical fuel pump. So we'll reuse this guy too, because there's really nothing wrong with him. Okay, so all the hold down covers and clamps and such, we're going to reuse those. We just got to get them all cleaned up. And most of the cleaning I'm going to do off camera, just because it's hugely boring. And if there is any interest in watching me clean an engine blocks, fast motion or whatever, I'll show you guys how I get it prepped. But leave some comments down below, and I'll circle back to them. If there is interest, we'll throw a video up. If not, just give her a pass. Okay, so here's the camshaft. Eyeballing it, it looks pretty good. Now, I don't have the right tools to determine whether or not it is fine. So when I go to get the engine block machine, I want to bring this along and have the professional have a look at it, mic it, give it a test, and make sure everything is within tolerance. If we need a new one, we'll get a new one. If we don't, we'll reuse this guy. Okay, now that we kind of sorted between what we're keeping and what we're tossing, I'm just going to finish putting away the tools here for today. Basically, for cleanup, it's super complicated on this one. We're going to clean our tools and put them away properly. We're going to have to clean our workspaces from all the grease, throw some degreaser down on the garage floor and some kitty litter to soak it up. Give ourselves a little scrub down before going in the house, and that's pretty well it for the teardown video here. Oh hey, you're still there. Well, thank you for joining me for the 3-part mini-series here, tearing down the blown up 85 350. There's still a bit of work to do to it, including cleaning, machining, and fitting new parts to it. I figure the whole cleaning and getting it transported over to machining, we might film it, we may not, we haven't decided yet. It's kind of boring, so I might just do it as a sped up video. If you're interested to see it, throw a couple comments in the section below and we'll maybe do a sped up video of it, a music video or something like that. In the meantime, while we're figuring on an appointment for the machinist and exactly which components we're going to go with, we're going to move on to a couple other things we got to do on the 85 GM and a couple things on the Comet, and I think we're going to take a break from the engine teardown, give the degreaser a chance to soak up the grease on the ground, and that'll be about it. I want to say thank you very much for tuning in. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, leave any feedback you like, and we'll hopefully see you all next week. Have a good day. I don't think we're using that.
No. Also terrible singing.
Good.
Adam, you can see the skeleton in the shot.
No, we don't exactly have Bruckheimer's budget here.
Okay.